All right, guys, brand new Netflix movie just...
What is that? Stop it. Stop it. Don't. Is it on my head? I can't see it.
What is up, Netflix fans? Welcome back to my channel. There is a Swedish thriller on Netflix that dropped today. It's called Red Dot, and I had to talk about it. I need you in the comments below. Are you a fan of this year's international features on Netflix? We've had a few really surprising ones so far. And were you looking forward to this movie? Does the name Red Dot intrigue you? Okay. And here's the basic premise. When Nadja becomes pregnant, they make an attempt to rekindle their relationship by traveling to the north of Sweden for a hiking trip, but soon their romantic trip turns into a nightmare, and this movie got off to such a rousing start. I loved the off-kilter introduction, one that you don't necessarily expect, and then we get into this trip. The trip of a lifetime, and not necessarily in a good way. I felt a bit awkward at the beginning when it came to building their relationship because there is a moment, and you'll know exactly what I'm talking about, that makes you feel a bit uncomfortable, and then they realize that maybe things aren't going as well as they thought they were, and they're at a complete standstill when it comes to multiple things. And of course, she is pregnant, and she doesn't necessarily know if he's the guy that can commit to this commitment. So all of those things combine to give us an interesting start to a movie that really doesn't get going until they set off on this hiking trip of sorts. And it's one of those films that almost reminded me of Unhinged, right? Because in Unhinged, we had a character who makes a mistake, and because they make a mistake, they are then almost hunted down by Russell Crowe's character. You take that premise and you somewhat apply it to this situation, even though they're not even necessarily making a mistake. It's just they encounter a group of individuals that don't seem to be the nicest guys in the world. Okay, don't think anything about it. Then they go off and they do their thing. But while out in the wilderness, and I did have some questions about kind of the layout of this entire place. There are multiple locations, and at times they're in one place, then they're in another, and it's like, how did they get there so quickly, even though it seemed like a trudge? Okay, these are minor nitpicks. When it really gets good is when the name comes into play. The movie's called Red Dot, and I won't spoil exactly what happens. All I will tell you is that while they are out in this tent, and I really loved the look, whether it be the shot selection, the cinematography, when they were outside, I thought it all looked really good, especially when it becomes really like misty and snowy and you have the white kind of overtaking all of the different colors. I thought it looked genuinely beautiful. But when the red dot shows up and it's just kind of moving all around the tent and their bodies and they're trying to figure out what's going on, that's when the movie got engaging, and that's when I kind of scooted over onto the edge of my seat, and I didn't really leave that position until the end of the film. And that's important when it comes to a movie like this. So if you're looking for an intense thriller and a second act, and normally you're looking at the first or the third to be the most intense, and the third is very intense here. I do have my qualms and nitpicks, but the second act of this movie is when it really gets lively and when it really picks up. And that's when I sat down and said, okay, this is what we're talking about. I was genuinely feeling the intensity. There is a scene that involves another member of this group. I won't say who or what or when. All I will say is it becomes gruesome to a point to where I don't know if it was necessary. I understand to a degree why they did it, but once you get the revelations at the end, I was like, I don't know if that makes as much sense in context. And you'll know what that scene is when you see it. All I will say is it may not be everyone's cup of tea. I'm trying not to spoil it, but yeah, I think it was just too much for me personally. But again, I guess I can't complain too much because that was the entire point, was to make you kind of catch your breath in that moment. Then the movie starts to take some twists and turns. We learn things about this couple that maybe we didn't know before, and we kind of see the trajectory, the path that they are on about halfway through the third act. And from then on, the film almost felt like it was trying too hard, right? It's like they gave us a very simplistic story. All we needed was that turning point at the end to understand why this was happening in the first place, but they overdid it, in my opinion, and I wasn't completely on board. Now, was it shocking? Absolutely. Did it make sense in the grand scheme of things? Yes, but I wasn't in love with the story progression. It's still not bad. The third act is as intense as you want it to be, but the revelations that our characters face and then the ending itself, and don't get me wrong, I love a good shocking ending and sometimes one that kind of leaves you hanging. Yeah, I'm on board with that if you give me the proper build-up. And I don't know if it was worth what we got for the ending. I won't go beyond that, but for me it didn't work. For a lot of people it will, and still doesn't mean the movie is bad. I needed a bit more from it. So at the end of the day, if you guys like this Netflix review, be sure to drop your thumbs up for more, and stay tuned to All the Boys I've Loved Before 3. That review is coming later today. Red Dot nails the intensity needed to keep the audience on edge, but the third act was a bit too convoluted for its own good. Still not going too low with my score, though. I'm going a 54%. It does a lot right. And visually, on an emotional level, I think it will keep a lot of the audience members engaged and intrigued. But for me, the story just kind of gets too twisty and turny in the third act. But I need you guys down below. Were you looking forward to this? Did you enjoy it? And again, what is this? Is it back? It's back. Do you guys see this? It's still here. I know we've kind of went away from the screen, but I promise it's still here. It's definitely not me editing this in post. That's not what this is, okay? I'm lying to you. It's fake.